All right, Alabama fans, you asked for it. Andrew Bone and Tim Watts. This is our first show, the inaugural Tim Watts and Andrew Bone show. He'll probably say the Andrew Bone and Tim Watts recruiting show. And we're here to talk about the cookout this week. It's been a dead period, 20 something days, but that all ended on Thursday. And Alabama's hosting a big group of visitors this weekend. Even though this class, number one in the country, has did a terrific job up to this point. This staff has done a terrific job getting them here. They still got to hold on to them, and they're moving on to 26. And we've also got some top targets coming in.
Yeah, no, it started 6 months ago when Kalen DeBoer first arrived on campus, and one of the first phone calls he made was to Ryan Williams, and being able to get him back on campus after he decommitted was huge for Alabama. And then you kind of go through the spring where you had hundreds of recruits that were on campus for those unofficial visits, kind of building those relationships, and then you kind of get into the summer where you saw 49 plus, maybe 50 official visitors in the month of June. And we saw what kind of happened, with all these commitments, the cold summer. I mean, it was an exciting time for Alabama. And now it kind of comes to fruition here at the Champions Cookout this weekend. And everybody kind of wants it to be this huge event with tons of top prospects. But you got to remember, most of these guys have already committed. And, this past month was really exciting for Alabama, which, as you mentioned, Tim, number one recruiting class in the country.
I mean, June came. You know how fans are. They're like the kids. Same with us. You want to open all your presents at once, and then you rush through them in 10 minutes, and you don't have anything else left to open. So that's kind of where the stage we are right now. Number one class in the country, really down to a few prospects. They're still like recruiting on now. We have to note senior year can be important. We've seen a lot of guys. We can go through the list. I think Eddie Jackson and Josh Jacobs are two prime examples of guys that popped up late, and there's a dozen more. So they will be evaluating, watching a lot of guys. But it's really going to be important, I think, for the 2026 class. And we're going to see a lot of those guys on campus this week.
Yeah, I think when you can get some of your early top 26 guys on campus for this Champions Cookout, and it's a small group. It's not, there's not going to be 50 plus juniors that are on campus. It's going to be 10, 12 juniors that are going to be on campus. So they're going to get a lot of intimate time with this coaching staff and develop these relationships and these connections heading into the season. Now, the dead period is going to end. We talked about the dead period ending, but it also ends again on August the 1st. So you have the entire month of fall practice that begins for all these high school kids, and then they start setting up their fall visits. So which games do they want to go to? Because once you get into these game day visits, it's kind of crazy. I mean, because there's 100 plus kids that are going to be on campus. You don't get a lot of one-on-one time with the coaching staff. You get a chance to meet them, talk to them on the sideline, stuff like that. But it's not going to be like it is this weekend when these top end guys like Anthony Jones, Zion Gibson, Bonnie Cleveland, guys that are in state, they're going to have a chance to really spend some quality time with these assistants and get to know the staff a little bit better.
Hey, again, you guys and gals, do us a favor, hit that like button, hit that thumbs up. We appreciate the show's done fantastic. Again, wasn't sure we'd really what direction we'd go with the YouTube show, but if you like the content, want to keep it coming, just give us a thumbs up, get those notifications, subscribe. You'll know when we're about to drop the knowledge, make you laugh or make fun of each other, which you do pretty much on every show. But yeah, and Andrew, it's a good point. They've already got a top 10 class. It's a small sample size, but the 2026 group's got two commitments. It's in the top 10, oddly enough, but I think dominoes will start falling because it seems like everything's getting a little busier earlier. I mean, there's a lot of kids committed in June and, at the end of July. A lot of the top prospects, it doesn't seem as many who will enter. Now, there'll still be drama, obviously, with the recruiting and everything that goes with it. But a lot of these guys are going to be committed for the most part. The drama will be in whether they're flipping or, all that kind of good stuff. But yeah, overall, this is a good group. I think they went for quality instead of quantity. And again, you got a 7-day window. The NCAA, hey, let's just throw that out there and give them a window, which won't be there next year, which tells us this window is a mistake because they're getting rid of it. But you have these guys coming in, and you've got everybody, starting Thursday through Sunday. We're having barbecues, cookouts, splashes, pool parties. We're having pretty much everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, and like I said, a lot of different schools around the country are hosting events. So there's a lot of fighting trying to get kids on campus for that last weekend visit before the end of the summer. Next year, it's all gone, of course. So you move that cookout or that pool party or whatever it is to late June rather than late July. So gonna be interesting to see who goes here, who goes there. There's going to be a lot of eyes watching to see Alabama commitments. Do all the Alabama commitments? Are they just going to be in Tuscaloosa this weekend? Are they going to be somewhere else? So there's a few guys that we're going to probably see take some other visits this weekend. But the majority of kids are going to be in Tuscaloosa, and with 23 commitments, the majority of your class is done. But also the majority of your class is pretty solid. They don't plan on taking official visits. Now there are additional visits this fall. There's a few who still will, but for the most part, Alabama can start really to focus more on that 2026 class and beyond.
Yeah, you just want to hold on to what you've got at this stage. I mean, you got the number one class in the country. You just want to hold serve and get to that next level. Like you said, hold on to what you've got, start focusing on that 2026 group. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of 2026 commitments, I think, coming up around the country. But to me, it's kind of risky. I mean, you're committing kids you haven't even seen play as a junior. There's a lot of difference between a sophomore and a senior. I mean, just look at yourself when you were in high school and you were 15 years old versus you were 17 and 18. A lot of changes go on. A lot of guys will emerge. A lot of guys won't live up to the billing. We see that every year. Guys that we have high hopes for as sophomores that, don't quite pan out when we get to their senior year. But I think the group overall is exciting. I know the staff, they've got a nice break, and coaches across the country are going to have to, get back in the swing of things. But getting guys on campus, I mean, obviously the biggest name we've been watching was AK Deer. He's been one of the guys out there that we've got predictions and RPMs on, number 2 running back in the country, consideration for 5-star, a guy, one of the elite players at the running back position. He's coming in this weekend, and all eyes are kind of on because, it kind of can tip where you're going, where you take your visits. We've always said follow the visits, right? So guys taking visits this weekend. And again, you're looking to see if, you're busy looking to see if you can get other people's commitments on your campus, but also you got to watch out for your commitments taking visits.
Yeah, it was kind of funny. 2 weeks ago, people were worried that the list wasn't really extensive as far as the guys that were coming in for the cookout. Why isn't this guy coming? Why isn't that guy coming? Well, because they hadn't made decisions yet. They were still, talking to different coaches, trying to figure out what their weekend plans were. But as you mentioned, they were also probably trying to keep things pretty tight-lipped as far as where they were going to go because, an AK Deer only potentially visiting Alabama this weekend, a decision coming soon. That may indicate that Alabama's in a pretty good spot, which we have previously predicted on BOL in favor of Alabama for AK Deer. Still have to kind of wait and see how that goes. But as you mentioned, what's going to happen with some of these other guys? Derek Smith, is he going to end up potentially going over to Auburn's Big Cat weekend? He is scheduled to be back in Tuscaloosa on Sunday, so that's going to be something to watch. Jamarian Gordon, who's in that 26th class for Alabama, he's going to take a visit down to UCF this weekend. We already saw Caleb Cunningham, 5-star wide receiver committed to Alabama just a few weeks ago, was scheduled to return to Auburn for Big Cat weekend. Then all of a sudden decided to cancel it, not going to go. He's very locked in with Alabama right now. So obviously watching to see if anybody else potentially pops up and goes elsewhere. But for the most part, we're going to see the majority of Alabama's commitments back in Tuscaloosa, or they're not going to visit anywhere at all.
Hey, some of these visits will be decided the morning they wake up. They'll just want to feel. You got to remember, you're dealing with teenagers. They'll think they're going on visits, and they'll be too tired because they stayed out hanging out on Friday night to go anywhere Saturday. They'll pop up on Sunday. They'll have intentions of taking a visit on Saturday to one school and Sunday in another school, and they'll have so much fun on Saturday they'll end up staying 2 days. So this is very fluid. I know we use fluid a lot when we talk recruiting, and it's true. I mean, there's a lot of jousting going on right now. There's going to be to the last minute phone calls in the morning. But I think Alabama did a good job. And the majority, I mean, when you get, I don't think we can talk about this guy enough, but Keelan Russell, when you get him back on campus for this cookout, I mean, he's your leader. He's very quiet, he's very quiet as far as what he says publicly, but he speaks loud when he recruits kids. He talks to kids. He has influence. His game, very confident guy. So I think he's been a big part of, again, the dominoes kind of started with, we're not going to give it all to Keelan, but we think knowing who the quarterback was really kickstarted this class. And you saw the offensive line fall in place. You saw the wide receiver, Caleb Cunningham, fall into place. You've seen this class really, take it up. And number one's not a lock. There's still a lot of LSU's coming on strong. Texas laying in the weeds. Ohio State's been quiet. Oregon, they're shooting for every 5-star. There's a lot left to happen in this recruiting process. But Alabama, the one thing we feel confident with, if you're in the top 5 in this group, in this class, recruiting rankings, you're going to have a great class. Now, of course, you want to be number 1, but 2, 3, 4, and 5, they're all going to have really good classes because it's a very, very competitive year.
Yeah, it's very, it's very close. I mean, it's very tight. Yeah, and Georgia's going to have some big wins coming up. Oregon's still going to have wins. Texas is going to have wins. There's a lot of schools that are going to have some big recruiting wins. We still think Alabama, can have some big recruiting wins as well. And going into the season, there's so much that can happen. Different kids decide to, take last-minute trips to Tuscaloosa that they weren't previously planning on taking. They wanted to wait and see what Coach DeBoer and this staff was able to do on the field before they got very serious and more interested with Alabama. So, and obviously coaching the staff changes. There's coaches that leave programs all the time. You look back at, somebody like Jahad Campbell. It's, going to be going into, his senior year this year at Alabama. This is a guy that decommitted he was solid commitment to Clemson, very solid commitment to Clemson. Then Brent Venables gets the job at Oklahoma, reopens his recruitment, and Alabama was still there. They had still continued to recruit him throughout the entire process. He decides to take an official visit to Alabama on that last weekend before the early signing period. Alabama was able to get him on board. So things like that can still happen. It's not just the guys that kind of emerge late, and we've seen that, as you mentioned, with Josh Jacobs, Eddie Jackson, Christian Barmore, another one of those players. But there are kids that are watching Alabama closely that Alabama's continuing to kind of keep interest in, keep warm, and kind of see what happens down the road.
Hey, we want to remind you guys, we've got the BamaOnLine.com for $1, 100 cents. Andrew's worth at least 10 of those cents. I'm worth 90 every day. Every month, I'm worth 90 cents. Andrew's worth 10%. Joseph's worth $1 by itself. Joseph Hastings, who helps us do it. We got Charlie Potter. We got Jimmy Stein. We got all this news coming, and the team stuff's going to be really good. Excited to see Kalen DeBoer. So jump in there for $1. It's $1 for the first month. I don't think you can beat it. But certainly give us a try. But yeah, I agree, Andrew. Going back to big names, I think Anthony Jones is a name I'm really interested in. 2026. A guy that's kind of laid in the weeds a little bit. He's getting a little more love is Christian Robinson, right? He really only had 2 main guys that we heard about him with, right? But they were Justin Hill and Dawson Merritt. There's two of the best players in the country, 2 of the best players in the class, Wolf linebackers. He just did a really good job. And the one thing that kind of stands out to us, I think, is it's not just the players. Like, I think the mothers, I think the people close to him were all in for Bama before the players. They just building that relationship. We had an interview this week with Anthony. Christian Robinson's doing a really good job building that relationship there. He's going to be a national guy. I think he's top 10 in the country already. Probably Bama and Auburn maybe right now we're looking at, but this guy's going to be able to call the school he wants to and commit. He's going to have his share of offers, but getting him there, building that relationship, getting him around Kalen DeBoer, getting him around Kane Womack, that's obviously a big win just to get him on campus.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I'm really interested, in this 26 in-state class, because we hadn't seen a lot of offers yet in 26 for players in the state of Alabama. There's been a few, but not a ton. Obviously Jamarian Gordon's committed. Anthony Jones was offered. Zion Gibson from Gadsden City, defensive back, who's also going to be back in Tuscaloosa on Sunday. That's certainly a guy that we're watching very closely. Kid that grew up an Alabama fan, but he has national level offers. There's a lot of schools that are fighting hard to get Zion Gibson in its class. But I think obviously being up in Gadsden, connections there with Alabama, played alongside Dre Kirkpatrick Jr. last season. But being an Alabama fan certainly can help in some situations. But Vodney Cleveland out of Prattville, defensive lineman who was offered during the summer. That's another guy that that we're going to watch closely, see how things go with him. Not just now, but during the season. How do these guys perform on the field this fall? Are these going to be guys that Alabama continues to heavily pursue, which we expect that they will, but not a lot of offers so far in this 26 class. So I'm interested to kind of see who else kind of emerges down the road for Alabama in state wise.
Yeah, I mean, this is the staff's first chance to get a great look at him. And again, you got to realize how young. I mean, in the past, I don't think heading into their junior year there was nearly as many push for commitments that we're seeing recently. I mean, you want to get that momentum. Hey, there's a risk. You commit guys 20, this far out and you don't like them, you have to drop them there in state. You can run into stuff like that. So I do like Alabama's approach of getting a good look at them, evaluate them. Some of them they had in staff, some of in camp, some of them are no brainers. Some of them the former staff already knew. But yeah, getting those guys on campus this early. And again, you mentioned, that duo of Drake Kirkpatrick Jr. and Zion Gibson, their defense was almost a form of offense. They scored so many daggone touchdowns on interceptions and special teams. I mean, it's Drake Kirkpatrick's highlights, Drake Kirkpatrick Jr.'s highlights look like a wide receiver if you just start the play after the interception. He had
Right.
so many, or the punt return or kick return. And Gibson, probably had equally his years. So, I mean, you're out here trying to pass and you got two guys that the ball just chases them down. But, getting him and Jones, obviously two top guys they've seen and had good looks at. That's two good in-state guys to get in. Now, how about some of the out-of-state guys they're bringing in?
Yeah, I think you got to start out with Jackson Cantwell.
Yep.
Top 4 overall player in the country, number 2 offensive lineman in the country, out of Missouri. I mean, this is a kid that has visited Alabama before, so this isn't his first trip to Tuscaloosa. He was in town last summer. Also attended a game last fall. I think he was at the Alabama-Tennessee game. So this is his first trip back to Tuscaloosa since the new staff took over. He's had a lot of praise for Coach Cap. Said that he had a lot of respect for Coach Saban, the previous coaching staff, but thinks that this new staff might be better off for the future for Alabama. He's really excited about getting down to Tuscaloosa. Xavier Griffin, kid that Joseph had a great interview with on BOL today, so I'd certainly go check that out out of Gainesville, Georgia, number 2 linebacker in the country. There's a lot of really good recruits that are going to be in town that are in that 26 class that are out-of-state kids. And like we mentioned earlier, it's a small group, but it's a very talented group of top kids that they're bringing in to build those relationships with, build those connections with, and like I said earlier, have a little bit more of an intimate time with, because you have 50 plus kids on campus. You don't get a lot of one-on-one time.
Yeah.
It's, hey, how you doing? Good to meet you. We're going to be recruiting you here, for the next, year. You get a guy in, one player at each position group or 2 players at each position group. You get a lot more one-on-one time and a lot more, personal time with these assistant coaches.
Yeah, a guy I'm watching is Brandon Arrington. I mean, you're talking about, got the speed. He's athletic. Probably have the, probably have Shep and Mo Lindquist, Indian wrestling to see, finger thumb wrestling to see who can get him on which side of the ball. I think he'll end up at wide receiver. I know Shepard had offered him, Coach Shep had offered him at Washington. And I think that he's a guy that will come in with that elite speed. Alabama's going to love that kind of guy that can fly. They love those guys. And, they've had so much success in California. And, the thing about it is we had this discussion on where we had people actually saying, I hope they don't, bring in too many West Coast guys, which we never understood, because when you look at the guys they've got committed, these are elite guys. These aren't guys Nick Saban would be like, nah, we're good. These would be guys Alabama's recruiting, elite corners types, obviously, Dijon Lee and Chuck McDonald. Also Arrington, has a connection to Alabama, has relatives here, says his grandfather is from here, I believe the story said. I know he said he's an Alabama fan, and so is some of his family. And going back to Xavier Griffin, who you mentioned, his mother played basketball at Montevallo, which isn't far from me and you. She's a basketball, and they have relatives in state, a lot in Huntsville, I believe, was in the story also. So you see these connections. So these aren't just random guys being recruited. And again, building relationships with people that have that respect for Alabama is always big.
And you also have a top 3 quarterback that's going to be on campus this weekend in Ryder Lyons out of Folsom High School in California, another California kid. A few months ago, somebody posted on our board. This was before we saw the wave of California commitments. They asked us, do you think Alabama's going to sign over 4.5 kids from California? And of course, at the time, we're thinking, you start going through the list, and there was one kid that we certainly expected at one point that was going to eventually commit to Alabama, and that was Josiah Sharman. That's was a guy that we were expecting before the summer started. But I thought, there's probably no way they're going to get over 4.5 kids from California. I know they're involved with a lot of these guys, but there's just no chance. They're currently sitting at 6 commitments from California, and including a punter who's ranked number 3 in the country. So they've done a really good job, carrying on those relationships from the West Coast. Obviously, with Coach DeBoer being at Washington, but Courtney Morgan, he's certainly done a fantastic job as well. California guy has those connections, but a lot of those relationships were built early on, and now they're starting to form those relationships early on in this 26 class, and they're going to get a top 3 quarterback on campus with Ryder Lyons. Also plays at Josiah Sharman's high school at Folsom High School, and also a high school that who else played there back in the day?
The Jonah Williams.
Jonah Williams,
right?
So a little bit
I
of
think
a connection.
Folsom. I think Johnny Cash. I'm gonna be honest with you. That might be before your time, but dude did a live show at Folsom Prison. So we got. No, I got bailed out. You bailed me out. Thank goodness. So, but yeah, I mean, all that's a good point. Get the quarterbacks in, because that 2026 group, I'm looking at those quarterbacks, they're falling pretty quick already for the 2026. I find it hard to believe a lot of these 2026s are going to be exactly who we thought they were 2 years from now. Some will be better, but not all of them will. I just feel like the movement. And again, I think that, when Nick Saban retired and Kalen DeBoer arrived, and we looked, because kind of mostly thought about George McIntyre up to that point for the most part,
right?
And Alabama was knee deep in that with Tennessee, of course, where he ended up committing. But when we looked at the quarterbacks, like Kalen DeBoer had to choose from, basically everybody was committed. It was amazing how many committed, and we had just been focused on the portal window, the national championship, the playoffs. I mean, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. You get these guys in, but you made a good point earlier. I meant to comment on, this isn't just a visit. This is a hangout. This isn't going to the academic buildings. This isn't unless you want to. This is hanging out, standing around, eating, swimming, whatever you do. This is going to be more like a family picnic, which is a much easier way to walk around and shake hands that say, we applauded the staff because they did such an amazing job of doing that during the spring, hosting the visitors. And we heard nothing but positive reviews, but you're out there getting to know your team for the first time. It was like a blind date. That was an introduction to this team on the field, and you still were able to handle everything that went with, shaking hands and bumping fists and hugging grandma and all that stuff. So they did a good job, but they got that chance this week. Probably a little groggy from having some time off. Again, I don't get how this window's open just randomly. Obviously they closed it but it is a chance for a lot of people to get ahead on 26, and not everyone's got that luxury. Some of them are scrambling to catch up on 25. So Alabama kind of reminds me of the last visitors weekend in February, every signing day, where that class was done and they brought in a lot of underclassmen. That's kind of what this feels like to me anyways.
Yeah. And, kind of going back to your point of this, being able to spend some more time with these coaches and hanging out, we talked to a lot of different parents throughout the summer. They just absolutely raved about this coaching staff. And one interview that I had was with Dawson Merritt's father, Dave Merritt, who's a coach for the Kansas City Chiefs. He said, we went to Alabama, and he goes, we were looking over the practice field and talking to Coach Kalen DeBoer for over an hour and a half, and it was nothing about football. We were just talking about life, talking about what we like to do, basically who we are. He goes, it was such a personal relationship. And he goes, that mattered so much to us, being able to sit down and have real conversations with these guys rather than them just telling us, hey, this is what we can provide you NIL wise. This is why you need to come to Alabama. This is all the success that we've had through the years, whether it's the program or this coaching staff and the success that they've had elsewhere. It was just more about building those personal relationships. And that is what really has carried over into this summer and has built this momentum with this class, getting all these commitments, making it all the way to the #1 recruiting class in the country. But that's going to help in the future with these 26, 27 guys. You're going ahead and you're starting pretty early, building these relationships with these guys. I mean, you think about all these guys that are committed right now to Alabama. Majority of them didn't even know this staff until February or March. And they've put in a lot of work since then. So now you're getting a chance to really develop these relationships now, which many of them have already begun. But even the kids that are coming into Tuscaloosa this weekend that haven't been to campus before, they're going to have that connection very early with this staff, and it's going to carry over through the season and into the off season.
I think one thing we have to mention is, also do us a favor. We'll remind you one last time before we get out of here, hit the like, subscribe button, get those notifications. Appreciate y'all being here. We'll keep the content going. I mean, it's nothing like Andrew and me's face. We can do the box out if y'all want us to, but we appreciate y'all being here, having a good time with the show. But one thing we definitely want to touch on is the fact that you're getting these 2026 on campus is good, but look at who all was there with them. This 2025 group, who's proven to be pretty tight-knit group. I mean, they've heard at this stage, everybody's heard about Keelan Russell, right? He's the Elite 11 MVP. He's a 5-star. He's moving in. So a lot of these guys are familiar with Keelan, and they all do a good job because you see a guy commit for Alabama, and you look in the comments, you can guarantee Dijon Lee's there. You can guarantee Duke Johnson's there. You can guarantee Luke Metz is there. There's so many guys out there, and you see them tweeting at each other and join the club and all that stuff. Very tight-knit group of guys. So that's going to be good too, because they're going to get the feel for who they're going to be around. And there's a genuine vibe to this. And like you said earlier, I think the biggest thing here is relationships. I know everybody gets hung up on the NIL, and the NIL is basically going to factor into every recruitment, as it should, but it's not going to be the end-all be-all for every recruitment. Alabama has guys committed who Alabama did not give them the highest NIL. I'd say that was the majority of the cases. Good schools, good recruiters are going to do that. Georgia's probably following along the same lines. Other schools will go all in NIL-wise, and they'll make it more of a business decision. But Alabama's choosing kind of the personal touch, and other staffs will do it. It's not just Alabama. And I think this is super important. I'll tell you why. Because of the portal. Because when a kid comes in highly recruited, highly ranked, doesn't play right away or something like that, starts getting in his feelings and maybe wants to leave, or, when you hear this every year, we don't report it, or you guys and gals, y'all would go nuts. Y'all be pretty mad at us. We reported every rumor about someone wanting to leave because they get homesick or whatever. But it comes in handy to have mom in your corner, dad in your corner, a coach in your corner to help say, listen, slow down. You knew you weren't playing as a freshman. You knew you weren't going to be a star as a freshman. Next year is your year. So I like the personal touch.
Yeah, the funny thing about NIL is all the people that are saying, Alabama's dropping bags right now. We're going to drop our bags later. That's kind of been the funny thing to me. But most of these NIL discussions at all these different schools, when you go on these official visits, those discussions are happening at every school. It's not just happening at Alabama. It's not just happening at Oregon. It's not just happening at Georgia, wherever. It's happening at every school. And, you make the best decision for yourself and for your future. NIL is included in that. And, we know it, but those discussions aren't happening in December anymore. Those discussions are happening in the summer. They're happening in the spring. So I don't get the whole, Alabama's dropping bags, we're going to drop bags later. That narrative is just beyond stupid, in my opinion. Now, you look at this weekend, you got kids coming in campus. I don't think, Jalen Milroe being on campus is great. Malachi Moore being on campus is great. It's good to have those guys, but it's going to be more important for the younger guys, Ryan Williams, Jalen Mbakwe. As you mentioned, all the guys that are committed, Keelan Russell. It's not just Keelan Russell. Keelan Russell is not the only 5-star that's going to be on campus this weekend that's in the recruiting class. You got Dijon Lee coming from California. You have Ty Haywood coming from Texas. You've got a lot of these top commitments that are going to be making their way back to Tuscaloosa, that are going to be around these 26, even 27 guys, and trying to build those relationships, those early connections, with those guys. So I think that's going to be important, to be around the freshmen, to be around the guys that are committed, and continue to grow comfortable, because those are going to be the guys that they will potentially play with in the next few years.
Yeah, that'll be more of their teammates, the 2026 than Jalen, Jalen and, Malachi Moore and those guys. But they probably, obviously those guys are good on campus as well. We've seen a lot of the upperclassmen jumping in there. I mean, of course, Ryan's going to recruit. That's what he does. I mean, that he's terrific at it. We've talked about Jalen Mbakwe. He's a guy that silently, we always say Ryan recruits everybody, but Jalen recruited Ryan. I mean, that's a pretty sound statement there. So
yeah, Ryan credited. You ask Ryan who was the best recruiter on Alabama staff, and he says Jalen Mbakwe.
Well, people that were at the Alabama-Mississippi game were talking about, how friends, you have a group of friends, you'll have 10 or 12 people or whatever in a group. A couple or three will sneak off to the side and have that private conversation from the group. That was Jalen and Ryan. So we knew how close they were. They love it. They got a lot of Bama in them. They love it. So they're going to push they're going to push them there. But the narrative, I was going back to your NIL. Nobody knows the Alabama NIL better than people on rival teams' message boards. I mean, it's pretty amazing that they have the access to tell you exactly, and it all it takes is one stupid statement for the dominoes of stupid statements to follow. Nobody knows what's happening. And also saying you dropped a bag, it's the NIL, it's a direct deposit. That's not even a good, that's not even a burn anymore. You know what I mean? So I think that this staff, because if you follow the narrative of Husky Harzen, he can't recruit. They're only going to, I mean, you kind of look stupid, right? Whoever said that, you look dumb at this point. You were obviously wrong. Just say you're wrong and move on. This is a pretty good recruiting staff. Courtney Morgan, Christian Robinson, Freddie Roach, Robert Gillespie. I'm forgetting them. Shep does a great job. All those. Cap does a great job. I mean, they do a good job of recruiting. And the thing about it is, to say it's just a bag drop or whatever, we saw the effort they put in March, April, May, June. We saw the effort. These kids were coming through by the dozens each day. I mean, you'd have guys popping up left and right. Anyway, Andrew Bone, that's my final thought. Give me one final thought on this recruiting weekend, and then we'll come back and touch on it, next week, and how the weekend went and all the good stuff.
Well, I think obviously, and we're probably both have the same mindset here. As we're both watching. We're both watching AK Deer. I don't think there's any doubt about that. That's what everybody's watching. Everybody's watching.
We are.
Everybody on Twitter, everybody on BOL, they're watching to see what AK Deer does this weekend. Now,
for sure,
one guy that I will say that I am going to kind of watch to see what happens with him that's not visiting Alabama this weekend is Faison Brandon. 5-star quarterback out of North Carolina, going to be making a decision on August the 3rd. He's not planning on being back in Tuscaloosa, but he is going to Tennessee, is going to NC State. Now, Alabama's been in that conversation since his visit last month. Will they be able to pull that off without him getting back to Tuscaloosa this month? I think it's going to be kind of difficult, but they're still communicating. They're still having, great conversations. So we'll kind of wait and see how his visits elsewhere go this weekend, and then what he decides to do next week.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate y'all. This is the first Tim Watts, Andrew Bone show. We will have Joseph Hastings on, some recruiting stuff.
21 years in the making.
It took a minute. It was worth it, though. We matured. We developed. We got better looking. I did. I can't speak for you. I didn't age in that time, but we appreciate y'all. We'd love to see you on the BOL roundtable. If you're not familiar with that, give BOL a try for $1. Come join the roundtable. We had some heck of a discussions on that thing. I mean, we have a lot of good debates, a lot of good pressure situations when a recruit makes a decision, and really just a great crowd. And all y'all that are BOL members make a part of it. We appreciate you also for being on the YouTube show. And again, I can't stress, they basically, had to make me do this. Andrew really twisted my arm in a lot of ways, and I enjoyed. I have a good time doing it. So we appreciate y'all being here, and we will see y'all next time.